The suburbs of London were shrouded in autumn twilight. Brian Campbell was picking up mail from the doorstep, returning home from the hospital. Among the letters, an invitation printed on expensive paper caught his attention. It was from his brother Michael, the younger of the two. Brian was often compared to his brother. This had been happening since childhood. Brian was serious and responsible, raised according to his parents' expectations. On the other hand, Michael, 5 years younger, was bright, active, and full of confidence. Their parents often told Brian, "You should learn from Michael." "I'm home," called Brian, and 7-year-old Ethan came running from the hallway. "Dad, today I drew a dinosaur at school. The teacher said mine was the best." Brian smiled, stroking his son's head. "That's wonderful. Will you show me?" From the kitchen, he could see 10-year-old Sophia doing her homework, and his wife Emily had just returned from work, unbuttoning her jacket and preparing coffee. A perfect family portrait unfolded before his eyes. Brian was proud of the home he had built over 15 years of marriage. "Anything interesting in the mail?" asked Emily. Brian held up the invitation. "It's from Michael." He opened the envelope and momentarily lost his ability to speak. "He's engaged to Olivia Blake." "The developer?" asked Emily, looking somewhat surprised. "She's a big shot in the industry, isn't she?" Brian nodded. Olivia Blake was a successful developer, well known in local business circles. He continued reading the invitation. "The wedding is in 3 months. Seems the whole family is invited." That night, after the children were asleep, Brian was examining the invitation in their bedroom. Michael always seemed to be a step ahead. Graduated from law school top of his class, worked at a prestigious law firm, and now marrying a successful businesswoman. Emily came out of the shower and noticed his expression. "What are you thinking about?" "Just Michael. Everything always works out for him." "Brian," Emily sat beside him, "you have a wonderful life. A good job, beautiful children, and me." She winked at him. Brian smiled. "I know." But what?" "Nothing," he said. "I'm just tired." The next morning, Brian called Michael. "Congratulations on your engagement." "Thank you." Michael's voice was full of excitement. "I can't believe it. She's perfect." "You'll help with the wedding preparations, right? We are brothers after all." Brian smiled. "Of course. Just tell me what you need." "Great. Lunch tomorrow. I want to tell you all the details." Brian checked his work schedule. "Sounds good. Looking forward to it." After the conversation, Brian felt mixed emotions. He was genuinely happy for his brother, but at the same time he was struck by a strange feeling. He thought about his own marriage. 15 years ago, he and Emily married for love. The first few years were passionate, but after the children were born, their life became routine. Nothing particularly bad, but the excitement had faded. During lunch the next day, Michael was beaming. He shared every detail from how he met Olivia to their engagement, and Brian listened attentively. "Brian, I've always wanted to be like you," Michael suddenly said. "Always the parents' pride." Brian was surprised. "Me? But you're much more successful." Michael shook his head. "In my career, maybe, but you have a happy family. That's what I've always wanted." These words made Brian think. The brother he envied actually envied him. Ironically, he had recently begun to feel that something wasn't right in what he considered his perfect family. A few weeks passed, and Brian was helping with the wedding preparations between work and family obligations. One evening, before bed, Ethan said to him, "Dad, I don't like Aunt Olivia." "Why not?" asked Brian, kissing his forehead. "Because she always hides her phone when she sees me, like she's doing something bad." Brian laughed softly. I'm sure that's not the case. Aunt Olivia is a busy businesswoman who deals with important information. It's just your imagination. Ethan didn't look convinced, but said nothing more. Brian told himself not to worry too much about his child's intuition. It was probably just stress from the wedding preparations. When he came home, Emily was talking on her mobile in the living room. When he entered, she quickly ended the call. "Who were you talking to?" asked Brian. "Oh, just a work call," replied Emily, looking somewhat uneasy. "Sorry I'm late. The project is behind schedule." Brian noticed that his wife had been coming home late more often lately. Sometimes she went out on weekends for emergency work meetings. He told himself it was just stress from Michael's wedding making him nervous. His family was happy. At least, he wanted to believe that. The day before the wedding, the hotel lobby was filled with preparations for the rehearsal dinner. Brian had just finished a final meeting with the hotel staff. The children were supposed to be playing in the hotel pool. As he crossed the lobby, something caught his attention through the large windows overlooking the parking lot. Ethan was in the parking lot, sneaking around Olivia's luxury car. He was peering into the car as if looking for something. Brian hurried outside. "Ethan, what are you doing?" He approached his son. "You shouldn't look into other people's cars without permission." Ethan turned, looking scared. "Dad, I was just checking something." "Checking what?" Ethan kicked the ground with the toe of his shoe. "Nothing," he mumbled. Brian was puzzled, but didn't press further. "Time to get out of the pool and take a shower. We have the rehearsal dinner tonight." That evening, the rehearsal dinner went smoothly, relatives from both families enjoying their time together. However, during dinner, Brian noticed that Emily checked her phone several times and once left the table to make a call. When she returned, he asked, "Is everything okay?" "Oh, just a small problem at work," Emily replied easily. "I need to take care of it tonight. Sorry, Brian." "Tonight?" "But the wedding is tomorrow." "I know, but it's an emergency. I'll be back in a few hours." Brian was disappointed but didn't argue. Emily was an executive director at a construction company, a position that demanded responsibility. He showed understanding, as always. "Okay, I'll take the kids to the room first." In the hotel room, Ethan was quieter than usual. Sophia was playing a game on her tablet, but Ethan sat on the bed, his chin resting on his little knees, deep in thought. "What's wrong, Ethan?" Brian sat next to his son. "When will Mom be back?" "As soon as she finishes work. Tomorrow is an important day, so go to bed early." Ethan was silent for a moment, but suddenly asked, "Is Aunt Olivia a good person?" Brian was surprised. "Of course. Why do you ask?" "Because..." Ethan hesitated. "Never mind." Brian kissed his son on the forehead. "Don't think too much. Come on, let's brush our teeth and get ready for bed." After the children fell asleep, Emily still hadn't returned. Brian called her mobile several times but only got voicemail. Around midnight, the door finally opened and Emily entered. "I'm sorry I'm so late," she said in a quiet voice. "The problem turned out to be more complicated than I expected." Brian looked at his wife's face. She looked tired, but also somewhat uneasy. "Is everything all right?" "Yes, we managed to resolve it," said Emily, unbuttoning her jacket. "Why aren't you asleep?" "I was waiting for you," said Brian. But anxiety was spreading in his heart. The morning of the wedding day, and the hotel was crowded. Brian was dressed in his best man suit, helping Michael prepare in his room. His brother was dressed in a clean white tuxedo and looked so happy that he could burst into tears at any moment. "I can't believe this day has come," said Michael, looking out the window. "Brian, thank you so much. This day wouldn't have come without you." Brian hugged his brother. "If you're happy, that's all that matters." The ceremony went perfectly. Smiles were everywhere. A festive atmosphere prevailed. However, during the ceremony, Brian noticed that his wife exchanged glances with his brother several times. At one point, it even seemed as if Emily winked at Michael. Was it just a friendly gesture, or... Brian thought his imagination was running wild, but when he looked around, he saw that Ethan had taken out his smartphone during the ceremony and was filming something. He usually didn't show much interest in technology. Brian gestured for him to put the phone away, but Ethan just looked at him for a moment, then continued. When the reception began and toasts and speeches were in full swing, Brian saw Olivia heading to the restroom. Thinking she might need help as a bridesmaid, he also stood up. When he stepped into the corridor, he was met with a stunning sight. When Olivia came out of the restroom, Emily was waiting for her. After a brief conversation, Emily put her hand on Olivia's shoulder and whispered something. The expression on their faces indicated that this was more than just a conversation between relatives. Brian hid behind a wall and watched the scene. His heart was pounding wildly. Olivia and Emily went in different directions, and Brian returned to the dance floor with trembling legs. Something was wrong, but it was his brother's special day. He pretended he didn't notice anything and forced himself to smile. After dinner, when the dancing began, Brian returned to the table and noticed that Ethan was unusually restless, constantly checking his phone. "What's wrong?" he asked. Ethan looked up at his father and replied in a quiet voice, "I'll tell you later." His eyes showed a heavy determination that didn't suit a 7-year-old child. Although Brian felt anxious, he said, "Okay," and patted his son's head. On the reception dance floor, the bride and groom's first dance had just ended. Michael was radiant in his white suit, and Olivia looked at him with love in her eyes. The host took the microphone and invited the groom's brother and his partner to dance. Next, we have the dance of the groom's brother, Brian Campbell, and his wife, Emily. Brian stood up and headed to the dance floor with Emily. His wife put one hand on his waist and took his hand with the other. The music started playing, and they began to slow dance. "You look great," Emily said softly. "That suit suits you." Brian tried to smile, but his heart was uneasy. "Thank you." Emily pulled him closer. "Something's bothering you?" "No, nothing," he lied. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see Michael talking to another guest. He was beaming. Seeing his brother truly happy, Brian felt guilty. His suspicions could be just paranoia. Maybe there was nothing between Emily and Michael. He was probably overthinking. When the dance ended, Brian returned to the table. There, he found Ethan waiting for him. His little face was tense with nervousness, and he held his smartphone with both hands. "Dad, we need to go, right now," whispered Ethan, grabbing his hand. Around them, guests were happily talking, and music was playing loudly. Brian smiled, trying not to lose his composure in front of his son, despite his confusion. "Why?" Ethan quietly took out his smartphone. "Look at this." When Brian looked at the screen, he saw a photo of Emily and Michael intimately talking in the hotel lobby, holding hands. The date was the day before the wedding. At that moment, Brian froze, the blood draining from his face. As he scrolled through the screen, more photos of the two appeared one after another. They were embracing in the hotel corridor, talking in a car. "I borrowed Sophia's tablet, and a message came from Mom," Ethan explained in a quiet voice. "I opened it by accident, and there were many photos of Mom and Uncle Michael." Brian sighed. "Ethan, you..." I'm sorry, Dad. Tears appeared in Ethan's eyes. But I knew Mom was doing something bad. Poor Aunt Olivia. Brian regained his composure and hugged his son. You didn't do anything wrong. Thank you for telling Dad. Ethan continued. Yesterday, when we arrived at the hotel, I took photos with Sophia's tablet because Mom was talking with Uncle in the lobby. Mom saw me and tried to hide something. Brian held the smartphone with trembling hands and looked at the photos appearing one after another. In the last photo was Michael passing some document to Emily, and then the messages. Brian scrolled and read their conversation. It was clear that their relationship had been going on for several years. Even more shocking was that Olivia seemed unaware of their relationship. Dad, Mom, and Uncle are doing something bad. Poor Aunt Olivia. Let's go home, Dad, Ethan pleaded. Brian's head was chaos. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, and trust as a family. Everything was about to fall apart. And his brother, the person he trusted the most. Competition had been there since their younger years, but he never imagined betrayal. Around them, the reception continued. Laughter, toasts, music. But to Brian's ears, it sounded like distant noise. He was numb, unable to bear the contrast between the festive atmosphere around him and his own crumbling world. Ethan took his hand again. Dad, are you okay? Brian came to his senses and looked into his son's eyes. He was moved by his son's courage, who, with his small body, carried the secrets of adults and tried to do the right thing. It was time to make a decision. Ethan, thank you for showing me this. You are a brave and honest child. He hugged his son. But we can't leave right now. First, I have to tell Olivia the truth. Aunt Olivia. Ethan's eyes widened. Yes, she has the right to know the truth. This is an adult problem, but thanks to you, I can do the right thing. Brian took a deep breath and decided to find the bride, Olivia, with the photographic evidence. Hiding the traces of tears on his face, he stood up. Holding Ethan's small hand, he said, "Let's go together." They pushed through the crowd, beginning to look for Olivia. Brian and Ethan found Olivia in the corner of the reception hall. She was talking with several business partners. Brian took a deep breath and gathered his courage. "Olivia, can I talk to you for a minute?" he said, trying to appear as calm as possible. "It's important." Olivia seemed to sense something in his expression. "Of course." She excused herself to those present and approached Brian. "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" Brian put his hand on Ethan's shoulder and said, "Let's talk outside." The three left the reception hall and headed to the hotel garden. The night air was cold, and music and laughter could be heard from a distance. In a quiet corner, Brian stood in front of Olivia. "I have something to tell you. It's very painful, but—" he continued, carefully choosing his words. Ethan discovered something. He took out Ethan's smartphone and showed it to Olivia. "Please, look at this." Olivia took the smartphone and looked at the photos on the screen. Her expression gradually changed. First confusion, then understanding, and finally pain and anger. She scrolled through the photos one by one. "How long?" she asked in a hoarse voice. "I don't know," Brian honestly replied. Ethan found this by accident. He was trying to do the right thing. Olivia quietly exhaled and returned the smartphone to Brian. She seemed at a loss for words. "I don't know how long this has been going on, but I thought you had the right to know the truth," said Brian. Olivia, although shocked, maintained a certain calm. "Actually, I felt something was wrong," she confessed. "Michael often deleted messages, unexpected work schedules, but I had no evidence." She looked at Ethan and gently stroked his head. Thank you for being brave enough to tell us, Ethan. At that moment, a voice sounded behind Brian. What are you doing? Turning around, he saw Michael and Emily standing in the garden. A look of confusion was on Michael's face. Emily seemed frozen for a moment. Her eyes were directed at the smartphone in Ethan's hand. What are you all talking about? Michael asked again. He seemed to notice something was wrong from the expression on Olivia's face. Olivia said quietly but firmly, The truth, it seems, has come to light. She pointed at the smartphone. I didn't expect to learn about you and her on our wedding day. The color drained from Michael's face. What are you talking about? Emily stepped forward, trying to explain. Olivia, this is a misunderstanding. We were talking about work. Enough, interrupted Brian. His voice trembled. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, and trust as a family. You two betrayed all of that. Michael reached out as if to snatch the smartphone, but Olivia took it first and looked at the screen. There, messages between the two were displayed. Can we meet tonight? I told Olivia I have a meeting first, Olivia read aloud. So this is the meeting you were talking about? Silence fell. Ethan held Brian's hand tightly. Suddenly, Emily burst into tears. No, it's not like that. Then how is it? Asked Brian. Why with my brother? Emily suddenly erupted in anger towards Brian. You were always better. Parental love, good grades, perfect family. I was always in your shadow. Michael was the only one who truly understood me. Brian was speechless. While he had always envied his brother, had his wife envied him? Still, that was no reason to take his brother. Olivia quietly announced, The wedding is canceled. I will apologize to the guests for today. Her voice was cold. A home cannot be built on lies. Michael finally spoke. Brian, please listen, he begged. Enough, Brian said calmly. Our marriage is over. For the sake of the children, leave quietly tonight. Ethan looked at his mother. Confusion and sadness appeared on his little face. Brian took Ethan's hand and said, Let's go get Sophia and go home. Before they left, he turned to Emily. A real family doesn't betray each other. They support each other. You betrayed me, but I can't hate you. Just don't come back into my life. He left the garden with Ethan. Behind them, Olivia was still saying something to Michael and Emily, but Brian didn't look back. The road ahead would be difficult, but he knew that building a new life based on truth would be much better than living in a lie. 6 months later, in a newly built suburb of London. In front of a new red brick house, Brian was unloading luggage from his car. The divorce process had finally been completed last month, and he had started a new life with his children. Ethan, Sophia, bring your bags, he called from the entrance. The children hurried to him, each carrying a small bag to the house. They had just returned from a weekend with their mother. Brian had started working part-time as a consultant using his psychology degree, which he already had. His work helping people with family-related problems allowed him to use his own experience. The children had adapted to school, and Ethan was especially recovering from the events of that day, regularly talking with the school psychologist. Days continued when he asked, Mom doing bad things. That's not my fault, right? But he was gradually beginning to understand. As Brian was preparing tea in the kitchen, the doorbell rang. When he opened it, Olivia was standing there. She was smiling, holding a small potted plant. A housewarming gift, she said. I thought something that grows would be perfect for a new beginning. Brian invited her inside. Surprisingly, a friendship had developed with Olivia after the canceled wedding. Both were wounded during the first few weeks, But one day she invited him for coffee, and a conversation began. "Thank you for telling me the truth that day," she said. "It was painful, but much better than building a life on lies." Sipping coffee in the living room, Olivia said, "Ethan is really a brave child. He didn't take the photos, but became suspicious from adult conversations and tried to find evidence. You're a wonderful father to raise a child with such insight." Brian smiled. It was too early an experience for him, but he's overcoming it. Ethan and Sophia were rebuilding their relationship with their mother. Ethan especially struggled to understand his mother's betrayal. Sometimes he had nightmares about the day he showed the photos from the tablet. Brian taught his children that people make mistakes, but that's not everything. Thanks to therapy, Ethan gradually began to enjoy weekends with his mom. "I'm starting to understand that Mom really loves me," he said one day. "But why can't Dad and Mom be together?" Brian patiently answered such questions. One day, browsing social media, he discovered that Emily had posted a photo with another man. There were rumors that Michael had left the city and moved to another office. Their relationship seemed to have quickly fallen apart. December, Christmas Eve. Brian was looking at the fireplace, reflecting on the past 6 months. It had been a difficult journey, but he and his children were gradually healing. The doorbell rang. When he opened it, Michael was standing there. He looked thin and tired, with remorse in his eyes. "Do you have time to talk?" Michael asked in a quiet voice. "I broke up with Emily. It was not just her. Everything was a mistake." Brian hesitated for a moment before opening the door wider. "The children will be happy," he said. "It's a special day. Come in." When Michael entered, Ethan appeared in the hallway. At first he looked surprised, but soon waved his hand. "Merry Christmas, Uncle." The answer to the question of what a real family is complex. It's not just about blood ties, but about trust, honesty, and sometimes forgiveness. Ethan's brave act taught them the importance of relationships based on truth, not falsehood. Rebuilding a family is not an easy path, but they had taken the first step on this road.